Mary Me, Annie here. This topic is in response to a question from a viewer. The question's also in the text box below in case you want to read it. You mentioned in one of your videos, I think Lammas, that you look at your notes from last year's celebration, do additional research, and then write up how you want to celebrate in the current year. Yep, I think I remember saying that, and I think it was in the Lammas video. I was wondering how you organize your journals. Are they one per year? Do you just use a dating system throughout, or is there another method of indexing or such that you use? I ask because my own journals seem so messy. Well, the first thing is, well, mine probably seem messy too, but there is underlying organization to them. I'm going to use that viewer's question, which I hope I answer going forward, as a launch into a discussion about journaling in general, because I've actually had several questions come to me recently about journaling. Journaling is one of those things that, well, it seems like we're in two camps. One of us is over there happily writing away. There's a smile on her face and we just love it and we love organizing it. We probably have binders and index cards and computer files and oh, who knows what else. And then there's the other people. They're scribbling away with a frown on their face and at some point just throw everything up in the air and say, the heck with it. I totally get both of those things. According to the mood I'm in, I can feel either way. But less and less over the years have I felt frustrated. I learned that I didn't have to get to that point of frustration and walk away. When I was in that place, I was almost always putting too much on myself when it came to journaling. It had to be meaningful. It had to be pretty, or well, at least it didn't have to be ugly. I had to look at the passing of each day as something that had to be captured. Something important simply had to happen every day of my life. That often left me looking at blank pages because my brain was as blank as those pages. I think it's the journaling equivalent of failure to launch, and then of course, failure to thrive. When I start feeling the presence of the needing to capture every little thing and feeling like all my moments are momentous, it's time I stop to remember, why do I journal? In the end, my journaling is to capture me in the moment. Sometimes it's memorable, more often than not, not so much. Or I can convince myself in that moment it is memorable, but mostly it's far more gentle and humble than that. It's not a fanfare and an announcement about my life, it's just consideration of some of the moments within it. That's not the journaling of my younger self, which was full of angst and hyperbole. Everything was a big deal. This is the journaling of my older self, full of exploration and reflection. It's journaling as a spiritual tool. It is journaling as a tool for self-discovery. Here are the reasons why I journal. Words matter. My words matter. They are the names, those words, that I give to what I observe in life. Those words don't have to be novels, paragraphs, or even sentences. They can be a word. Singular words can do the job of capturing experience, emotion, and ponderings just as long, just as well as lengthy writings. Our lives are full of incoming from a million directions. In the midst of that, it's not surprising we can lose track of ourselves. Journaling is a sit down with ourselves in the midst of that, a taking time for ourselves that life doesn't often permit. We're just too danged busy. When I align words with the experiences of my life, I explore my unique perspective. Even when what I described is inspired by something outside of myself, an experience with another, with others, a situation, words from others, thoughts and opinions from others. My words capture who I am in those instances. They're not meant to describe what's going on around me so much as, well, who am I in the middle of all of this? The words in my journals are really a conversation I'm having with myself. My words matter in the way they capture who I am in any given moment. And then they're equally as powerful regarding where I go from there. To me, journaling isn't about making a stamp on a piece of paper. It's about considering possibility. There's the moment, and then there's what comes next. When I'm journaling, I learn so much about myself. I understand my challenges better when I explore how I feel about them. Can't go walking around in my day-to-day life telling everybody, whether they want to listen or not, how I feel about every little circumstance of my life, the great and the small. I celebrate my life when I examine my feelings about the positive things I experience. And journaling, especially in times of turmoil or challenge, encourages me to be kinder to myself. To challenge myself within each of those situations, the glorious and the, well, not so. Who am I? And what am I feeling in the midst of this? Journaling keeps me from living on autopilot. This is a big one, guys. When things are humming along nicely, I can tra-la-la along. But I'm not genuinely celebrating or giving thanks. When things are challenging, I might tend to withdraw or make loud noises or disturbances in the flow of my life to cover what's upsetting me. Either way, I'm drifting through life outside of awareness. I'm on autopilot. I'm not really facing the reality of what I'm feeling and experiencing. Journaling takes me to a place separate from the wider living of my life to what are you feeling about this wonderful experience you're having? What are you feeling about this tragic experience you're having? Journaling is a daily practice for me. One that doesn't take much in the way of time. Sometimes, literally, it takes seconds. But it reminds me that some things are worth paying attention to and embracing as part of my routine. And when I understand something as small as that is important, I can apply that to other things in my life, which I am better off for taking on as a daily practice and routine. There are reasons why I keep a journal that I haven't necessarily thought of consciously. Yeah, there's a lot of subtext to the fact that I journal regularly. Some of that was obvious when I read an article in the HuffPost. It's been a few years back. I searched to find the article. I'll link it in the text box below. When I read the article, I kept thinking, yep, that's what happens when I journal. Some of the things that were aha moments for me were, I get to a more clear place of thinking, especially with challenging or complicated life issues. This is a place of self-knowledge. It's a place of clarity and discernment. Something challenging in that wider, busier aspect of our life, but more possible when we become more intimate with the moments of our life. Journaling is a completely judgment-free zone, or it should be. Sometimes we give over to self-doubt and lack of self-esteem in the things we write, the oh, why me, oh, poor me syndrome of journaling. But if we're journaling from a place of truly exploring how we feel, what our emotions are, and who we are in the world, I realize that it's the one place where we aren't judged. We're just exploring ourselves. There's no right or wrong to that. Journaling reduces my stress. Often when I journal what seems like the most important thing in the world, and put caps on every one of those words, the most important thing in the world, it takes on a new perspective. It gets smaller, as well it should. When I journal, I'm thinking of one thing at a time. Here, now, these words, my feelings, expressing them. My tendency in life is to be a juggler of thoughts and ideas, each landing briefly and not always explored fully. That's not what happens when I journal. My journal has to-do lists in it. Yes, it does. When I first started doing this, it was a leftover from my working days, I think, in my career. There were a lot of to-do lists. It's how I ran my career and how I was successful at it. Well, that probably bled over into my journaling, but then I started realizing that as I checked off things on the to-do list, as I realized I don't have to do this, this is not up to me, it's somebody else's problem, it's not for me now, I don't have the resources now, but I can work towards it. As I started making check marks against things on the to-do list and they became the they're done list, I found value in that kind of list keeping. My journal is, as the author writes, an idea incubator. I love those two words describing a journal, an idea incubator. Bright and shiny new things are always leaping off of my journal pages. There are things to be experienced outside of the journal once they've left off the page. My journal is a great contributor to my tendency to be a person in a rut, just doing the same old, and drifting along. Those bright and shining ideas I have in my journal, well, they might fall flat outside of the journal, but they also might become something that just inspires me and moves me to creativity and enthusiasm and an active function in the world outside of my journal pages. The article is called 26 Reasons Why I Keep a Journal and Why You Should Too. So there were 26 reasons in that article. But there's a few that just, yeah, that's why I do this. Our viewer question also referenced my comment that as I prepare for each Sabbat, I look back at the previous year's journaling in that same period. That's been a habit for a long time, as it was a suggestion from my first teacher. Here's a bit of why I do that, and also why I don't do that. There can be a trap to this if you're not careful. Looking back on the previous year reminds me that just because it's insert name of Sabbat, it doesn't mean I'm in the same place. It's said that Sabbats are like spokes on a wheel, each of them resting on a spoke on the wheel. But the wheel is turning. So even when it comes back to that same Sabbat on that same spoke, it's not in the same place. I do not revisit the Sabbats to judge the results of last year's Sabbat. I'll talk more about that. There are lessons to be learned in journaling from year to year when we have explored some aspect of our experience and wisdom in a prior year, but for whatever reason, we didn't act on it. We ask ourselves then in the new turning of the wheel, why not? What's up with me? Did we fail to do the work that's part of self-discovery? What made us hesitate, fail to explore, or leave the exploration abandoned, even if we started it? I do not judge anything left hanging from year to year. I simply revisit it, and I seek to know myself better through both what I did and I did not do. When I look back on a previous Sabbat, I see how what I took on as a working from that panned out over the year that followed. Sometimes, even though I may have diligently worked through the season of a Sabbat, I don't arrive at a place of completion with it. There's nothing wrong with that if I've truly given it my best. It might take the next turning of that Sabbat to re-engage and refocus. And if I feel complete, then it's time to explore another aspect of the Sabbat. I do not judge how far I've progressed in the lesson of a Sabbat when I've been aligned to it and eager to learn from it. But I can gauge when it's time to explore new things in a Sabbat, and that's a good thing, as we can get into, well, a kind of Sabbat rut. When I look at the years past Sabbat and any ramblings I've captured after it, I then have the power of looking at the length of that season and giving it a few concise words. These are words of power. When I condense an entire season's worth of Sabbath experience into the few words, and I try not to go over 3, I find myself within the passion of the Sabbath as I plan its new arrival. I do not venture back through all Sabbats at each Sabbath. The only thing I carry forward year to year is my tiny word list, which I've done for years and years and well, decades and decades and decades. Yes, sometimes the words are similar. Sometimes they're the same. But there's also a shifting and an expansion of my naming over the years that allows me, well, to inspire myself as I begin each new Sabbath season. When I write my focus for an upcoming Sabbath, I open my mind to what I've been journaling about in my life and consider how that Sabbath can help me broaden my life experiences and encourage me to keep on keeping on, give me insights into a new way forward, and celebrate my victories along the way. While my Sabbath outlines remain the same year to year in other ways, the workings within them change each year. They focus on my current need and desire. I do not do workings based on anything out there. In other words, grabbing and just plopping in because someone said it's a good thing to do this at Lammas. But I can't deny that I am inspired by things out there. They end up plopped into my journal for me to consider and determine what value is there in that for me. And then they just might be something that makes its way into a ritual. I don't keep old journals. Some folks hang on to their every word forever. I tend to revisit journals to grab the inspirational bits I've mentioned, and then I usually destroy the journals. Some of you guessed right then, didn't you? You grabbed your hearts, didn't you? For me, journals have their place in the moment, and they are specific to a time. I do not reminisce through past journals. Journals for me are the key to my future and not a journey into my past. It's kind of like my relationship to the turning of the wheel of Esbats and Sabbats. Each is powerful in its own instance, then it becomes part of a greater whole. Journaling, for me, is an exploration of momentum. I do have a bit of a disclaimer here, because if I were an artist, and I am not, occasional doodlings is the extent of what's ever been journaled for me. But if I were an artist, I would keep a separate art journal. And that art journal would be, well, it would live forever. It is not something I would destroy. I wanted to mention that because many of my friends here are extremely talented artists. There's something different about art. I don't know, something more timeless about it, but I would not destroy art pages. And lastly, our viewer asked about how I organize my journals. Well, nowadays, I journal on my computer, which when I was younger, I would probably thought of as journal blasphemy. But I'm in the mood at this time in my life to let my thoughts pour out of my fingers, kind of like a stream of consciousness. I hate to do this to you, but my relationship to journaling is along the lines of let it go. So now try to get that song out of your mind. When I handwrite a journal, I tend to analyze my words. I'm thinking about them as I write them. I'm talking myself out of writing them sometimes. Or I'm limited because my brain's already gone on to the next thought, but I'm still writing one from a time ago or even before that. And my tendency is to self-correct. Try to solve as I journal by hand. Where on the computer, what I think comes out my fingers unedited, whether it's a word, or whether it's a paragraph, or whether it's a long meandering. It won't surprise you that sometimes that's where my journaling goes, will it? I organize my journals by elemental quarters of the year and the seasons of the Sabbath within them. So I have 4 major divisions for earth, air, fire, and water in order of how they are and the wheel of the year. And then within those, I have a breakdown of each Esbit and Sabbath. And when I say Esbit, I'm talking both full and dark moon. This makes it easy for me to track in a year's time the flow of a year and then revisiting it later on. It also provides me with one of my favorite getting ready for Samhain exercises, a way of more or less putting the year to rest. I revisit the year's journal posts from the perspective of each element in that quarter. I look at what I've written in the season of each Sabbat and at each Espet, and I collect wisdom from that turning that aligns to the element of its quarter. So, for instance, the season of Mabon coming up is for me within the quarter of water. So I will look at my Mabon journaling from the perspective of water. This is what the year taught me through the lens of each element in their own time of the year. When I think I've gone as far in self-discovery as I can within each season, this last exercise for the year takes me further, and I can take those reflections into the dark time as fertile ground for the new year. There's a sense of I amness, which is where I go as the new year begins at Samhain. I am the result of the turning of the year just past. Oh yes, I'm the result of all the turnings before that, but they all led to this past year, didn't they? For me, journaling is a spiritual tool, and it is an exploration of self, an opportunity to not only explore, but evolve, step into my own personal possibilities. I know I'm better off for journaling. I know my spiritual devotion is better off for my journaling. I'm even just a better wife and a better friend and a better person in community because I journal. Whether it's a word, a sentence, a paragraph, a couple of pages, or a long, detailed blog. I journal every day. I hope that is helpful to the person who asked the question. I'd look forward to hearing about your experiences when it comes to journaling, if you do it, why you do it, what your challenges are, and what an impact it has on you as an individual and as a practitioner. The entire blog for this video, as with all of my videos now, or almost all of them, is available on my Patreon page, and it's available in the public part of that page. So if you'd like to see the words, you are welcome to take a journey over there, and that information is listed in the text below this video. I wish you all happy journaling, and of course, mirth and reverence. Merry part.